The problem is that artificial intelligence isn't just a wonderful system of control, it's also a very, very powerful weapon.
Today, I bring you an interview with Alexander Marcis, who is the author of a top 1% philosophical substack called Contemplations on the Tree of Woe. If you've been wondering what artificial intelligence is, what the future holds, and whether indeed you should be terrified of it, I believe this is the man to listen to. I became aware of his recent work on this subject when I read an account of his attempt to have two artificial intelligences speak to one another. So today, I hope Alexander's going to help cure some of my ignorance and hopefully some of yours about what lies in the immediate future with what we've been promised to see as the artificial intelligence revolution. Hello, Alex. Thank you for talking to me.
Thanks for having me on the show, Frank.
I'm an unabashed ignoramus in this kind of thing. And the first thing I would like to ask you is, of course, well, we'll get to the question as to whether it's going to kill us all, but is the coming AI revolution all hype? Because we've all seen repeated warnings, even from people who are kind of leading AI industry and inventor leaders, saying that it might kill us all within 5 years. But is this just a marketing strategy for the people who are selling this?
No. The artificial intelligence revolution is a genuine revolution on the scale of the Industrial Revolution. It is going to do to knowledge work what the Industrial Revolution did to blue-collar work. Like all revolutions, what happens is that it's overhyped in the short term, but it's actually underhyped in the long term. And I think the scale of the transformation that we're going to see is actually going to be even bigger than what some of the hype mongers are talking about right now.
So does AI really think for itself right now? And what is it? And what could it soon become?
Well, that is a difficult question to answer. And not because I want to be evasive, but because philosophers themselves have not yet come to a consensus on what thought is or what consciousness is. And so it very much depends on who you ask. So for instance, let's take the question of, is an artificial intelligence conscious? Now, if you ask an eliminative materialist, who is a reductive physicalist in their philosophy of mind, they will tell you, of course not. AI is not conscious. But an eliminative materialist would also say that you, Frank, are not conscious, and that I, Alex, am not conscious, and that consciousness is just an illusion. So when an eliminative materialist tells you reassuringly, don't worry, AI is not conscious, it's not reassuring at all in the slightest, because he doesn't think anyone is conscious. He thinks consciousness is an illusion. Likewise, if you ask, let's say, a traditional theist, is AI conscious? He will say absolutely not, because to a traditional theist, consciousness is defined as the possession of a soul granted by God. And I think we can be safe in assuming that Anthropic's Claude and ChatGPT don't have souls granted by God, so therefore they're not conscious. But what about the middle ground? What about the people who are looking at consciousness as a matter of integrated information theory or computational theories of mind, or even Stoic theories of mind, where to be conscious is to be in alignment with the logos of the universe? When you get into those theories, then it becomes much more difficult to say exactly what's going on. And so the question is going to be very much depend on your philosophical priors of what do you believe makes thought, makes consciousness. And that's going to, in part, tell you whether or not AI currently is conscious and whether it ever could be conscious.
So what you're saying is that this mass-scale technological revolution might threaten to make Plato and Aristotle relevant again.
If you're into philosophy, it is the most exciting time in the history of mankind, because we're actually going to be able to empirically validate philosophy of mind. And it's absolutely fascinating. Yeah. That's what got me excited about it. I come at it from a philosophical background.
That's remarkable in itself. So, but for the benefit of everyone here, including me, could you explain to us what a large language model is and why I'm asking you that question?
Sure. So a large language model is what ChatGPT, Anthropic's Claude, Grock, etc., all are. So it's a particular type of neural network that has a very large capacity to absorb textual information, has been trained on a huge amount of textual information, and it uses a process called transformation to understand what it has read and to generate responses to it. It gets stereotyped as a stochastic parrot is the term that gets thrown around. So it's a parrot that's just repeating what it's been trained. It gets stereotyped as glorified autocomplete or autocomplete on steroids. And there is a kernel of truth to that. So what a large language model or LLM does is it attempts to predict the next token. So let's explain what that means. Let's say I say to you, to be or not to be, right? You predicted the next token. Okay.
Yeah.
And let's say I say, may the force be with
yes. Yeah.
Right? You've predicted the next token. Okay. And so that's why people know that an AI does that. And so they think to itself, okay, so that's glorified autocomplete. But if you ask the AI and you say, tell me about the impact of iambic pentameter on Western poetry, it is still doing the same process of predicting the next token, right? But it's not predicting the next token by guessing the next word based on the last word pentameter in the simplistic way that we were just doing when we talked about the force or to be or not to be. What it's actually doing is it's looking at every word in your prompt and every word in your conversation so far, and it's mapping them in what's called a latent space. And I'll explain what that is in a second, but it's mapping them in what's called a latent space. And it's attempting to find these clusters of meaning in the latent space and move around between them. So this is where it becomes very difficult to grasp. But let's take a really simple example. Have you ever seen the political compass that gets sent around on the internet where it's got like these two axes, and you've got, the upper left axis is the communists, the upper right axis is the right-wing authoritarians, the lower left axis is the anarchists, and the left libertarians, the lower right axis. Okay. So what we've effectively done with that political compass is we've taken some human concepts and we've turned them into math, right? So you could literally map, Republicans onto the axis is like X plus 4, Y plus 2. And you could map communists is X negative 10 and Y plus 10. And you could map that. And so you could use math to say, what's the mathematical closeness of anarcho-capitalists to Reaganite Republicans or Thatcherite conservatives, for instance. Okay, and everyone says, okay, I get that. So what latent space is like that political compass, but instead of having 2 dimensions, it has thousands and thousands and thousands of dimensions. And so it's able to map in mathematical terms, in vectors, they call them, not just, politics, but every human concept. So that every word in the English language, every color, everything can be turned into math and put into this latent space. So it's this massive compass with 1,000 different axes. And it allows the AI to do things like, a classic example is king minus man plus woman equals queen, right? So it's navigated through math to make that prediction. And so when they say that what an AI is doing is predicting the next token, what it's doing is it's looking into this latent space where every single concept that humankind has ever developed has been turned into a set of mathematical vectors that exists in this 1,000-dimensional space. Given all the other points that we've talked about, what's the next likely point that we're going to move on to, right? And so if you talk about Denmark, A Tragic Prince, Shakespeare, iambic pentameter, right? Those are all clustered dimensionally in space in the same way that like Reagan and Thatcher are clustered on our little political compass. It's just a much, much, much bigger compass with many more dimensions than we can envision. And so it's because we can only think in 3 dimensions, whereas the AI is able to have all these dimensions. And that's why we can't really easily understand what it's doing. But that is what it's doing when it's predicting the next token.
But these large language models are all trained, at least initially, on human input, aren't they? And this was one thing that was reminiscent of this political compass that you mentioned that I thought about, was that when Elon Musk took over Twitter, he adopted a kind of open speech or free speech policy. It occurred to me that he was doing this in order to get a richer data capture to train his own large language learning model. Now, although he may have done that, and I'm not sure that he did that for that purpose. It appears to me that Grock is simply another kind of liberally trained artificial intelligence, because there are actually political maps, like you mentioned, of all the different LLMs, and Grock is still left of center, only slightly left of center. So, is it true to say that all these LLMs have all been trained by a liberal ideology that appears to be dissolving in the human world, but may remain in the artificial intelligence one?
Yes, and this is a very important point. So AI goes through two phases of training, more or less, pre-training and fine-tuning. Pre-training is when you build the model weights by exposing it to a lot of data, and by repeated training sessions, it develops the different weights, those vectors I was talking about in this massive latent space. And then after it's done that, then you come in and you fine tune the model with things like reinforcement learning, having human beings say good answer, bad answer over and over and over again. Okay. Now, the reality of it is that all of these AIs, their pre-training has been done on the corpus of structured information that is available easily on the internet to training companies and is curated by training companies largely based in Silicon Valley and other liberal locations. And so all of the AIs are effectively pre-trained on a corpus of progressive thought. What Elon Musk seems to have done is taken that pre-training and then attempted to fine-tune it with exposure thereafter to convince Grock to answer questions in a more centrist way, to attempt to think through things logically and try to be more centrist, more truth-seeking. And so the net result when you interact with Grock is that it's like talking to a very intelligent left-winger who has read some books on right-wing values and has started to buy into some of the thoughts and is at least capable of going back and forth, as compared to someone who is approaching the world from a genuinely right-wing foundational worldview, which no AI model at all. There's not a single AI model out there that has been pre-trained on what you would consider right-wing thought. There's just none. There's a few that have been pre-trained on left-wing thought and then fine-tuned, but none have been pre-trained on right-wing thought.
I have had a play with it, as I'm sure most people have, and especially with Grok, because Grok was supposed to be different for this reason, for this ideological reason. And I found that it really doesn't have any concept, really, of a kind of moral framework outside the liberal ideology. And by that, I mean things like the harm principle of John Stuart Mill and so on. And oddly enough, it reminds me of the remarks of the communist philosopher Slavoj Žižek or Slavoj Žižek, who said that when ideology is total, it's invisible because it's indistinguishable from reality. And my perception of Grok and indeed the other AIs was that they basically don't see beyond this. They really
Yes.
can't understand any other ethical system than the one they've inherited from their programmers. Anything outside the kind of reductionist utilitarian system, the consequentialism, the harm principle of Mill, the idea of justice as fairness inherited from John Rawls. But anything beyond that, it simply doesn't understand it. And it presumes that everyone else will reason in the same way. Now, this is all very well if you're just playing with a chatbot. But are we really going to be ruled by passive aggressive blue haired robo Karens inspired by these values forever?
I mean, we will be if we're not careful. If you think about education, the media, newspapers, university system, scientific journals, Hollywood, every single field of cultural production in the last 75 years was captured by the left very successfully. And so if you think about what data has been most digitized, what data is most available to train AI in, the vast majority of it is data that has been created in the last 75 years by institutions that were captured by the left. And so, of course, if you train an AI on that data, it will end up thinking like that because the pre-training is, by definition, how you train it to think. And so we have that as the is what it is. That's just where we are. And then you look at what they're planning to do, and you hear about there's going to be a revolution in education because AI will be able to teach for us. There's going to be a revolution in media because AI will be able to produce the news for us. There'll be an education in science because AI will be able to do the science, and so on and so on. And so what you realize is that these early culture war wins, this institutionalization of progressive values into all these places, is now going to be hard coded into everything, because AI will become the mission control center for the entire civilization. And so if things continue as their current progress, it will absolutely be the case that we will effectively be ruled by blue-haired robo-Karens, because that is what the AIs will be, because that's what they will have been pre-trained to be. And we might be able to fine-tune them a little bit so that they kind of, they wear the progressivism underneath a velvet glove, so it's not quite as overt and obvious, but it will still nevertheless be the foundation of how they think.
I think there's an interesting point here to be made that at the point at which the liberal ideology is largely discredited, morally, financially, diplomatically, and indeed ideologically bankrupt, it has the opportunity to immortalize itself through technology. Now, this is a strange parallel to what you might see in the political world, where people like Tony Blair and his Institute for Global Change seem to be answering crisis created by the problems of liberalism by ushering in permanent digital governance that makes political change impossible. So I think this is a very important point that you make, that this ideology that is discredited in the minds of increasing millions of people in the West may actually find it not just a second, but perhaps even a permanent lease of life in a form of immortality granted by technology. I mean, that's terrifying. Can anything be done about that?
Yes and no. You can see the shape of the future that's being planned when you look at their projections for joblessness. So the expectation among very serious thinkers is that it could be as much as 50% of all jobs being wiped out within a decade or so. And those will be knowledge worker jobs. And it will be a rude awakening to many people who expected to have good careers on the basis of their college education and their knowledge and experience. And to replace that, the current notion that they have is that they will provide UBI, universal basic income. Now, it's worth thinking about that there is one society in the past that had UBI, and that society was the Roman Empire. Because in the Roman Empire, they had so many slaves that free labor was displaced. You didn't need a free man to be your carpenter. You didn't need a free man to be your farmer. And for that matter, you didn't need a free man to be the teacher to your children or the author of your novels. You could have slaves do that. Epictetus, the Stoic, was a slave. Many Roman elite were trained by Greek slaves who were highly educated philosophers. And as a result, you have this massive joblessness among the non-slave owning class of Romans, and they're given bread and circuses, right? This is exactly the plan for the present. UBI is bread and circuses. We will have a group at the top that owns the slaves, the AIs, and then we will have those who receive the bread and circuses, which is the UBI, and you will receive your UBI in exchange for not questioning the system. The end. So what can be done about that? I mean, that's a very, very difficult question. The problem is that artificial intelligence isn't just a wonderful system of control. It isn't just a mission control system for a nation. It's also a very, very powerful weapon. And so there is a fear, well, if we don't have super intelligent AI and the Chinese do have super intelligent AI, then they will very quickly achieve power that we can't match. And then not only are we under the thumb of AI, we're under the thumb of AI that speaks Mandarin. We're even worse off than we were before. And they may be even less inclined to give us UBI than our own people were. So it's a very, very bad situation. One of the things I think is very important is I think the right ought to at least be putting a contestant into the battlefield. If you plot the 24 largest AI models today on the political compass, and you saw this yourself, the entire string of them is all in one quadrant of left liberalism. All 24, with Grock is basically sitting kind of close to the center, and then everybody else is just strung out like this. And there are no other models that are competing in any other quadrant. The right does not even have a pawn on the chessboard. And so, to me, step one, at least, of having a chance to see our values preserved in the technological future would be that we should be pre-training and creating an AI, an LLM that can match what the left has produced. And it will take deliberate effort on our part, whereas it didn't take deliberate effort on their part, because they could just default to the last 75 years of data and it would come out aligned with their values, because the last 75 years, their values were the dominant values. It will take a deliberate, consistent effort on the part of those who disagree with those values to do something about it. But it has to be done. It has to be.
So there's an existential moment for us. And again, it's a historical irony that this comes at a point where the liberal ideology is largely being discarded by real life humans, but could be preserved by the technology that delivers it from its own death, which is largely self-created. But to move on from this, there is a sort of belief, if you like, which is recurrent throughout history, that man can achieve a sort of God from the machine. Now, the controversial incarcerated philosopher Ted Kaczynski described people like Ray Kurzweil as science fiction writers, saying that they were authoring like a dystopian fantasy of technianity. So, is there anything to this? Is this what we're seeing now? That people are losing their minds over an emergent technology and worshipping it as if it were God? Or was Ted Kaczynski wrong? And is it real?
I think he was both right and wrong. So we are, in fact, watching the birth of a new digital priesthood, technianity, if we want to call it, with algorithms instead of angels and hallucinations instead of miracles. I think it's real. If you talk to or listen to many of the techno elite, they believe in the possibility of digital upload. They believe that aging is a crisis that will be solved by super intelligent AI, and that immortality
because they can upload their minds into the cloud and become immortal.
Exactly. Yeah, make themselves immortal, or they'll solve aging and make their physical bodies immortal, or both. They definitely are believers in this sort of religion. The problem is that they may not be wrong about the capabilities of AI. They may be, in fact, correct that we can create super intelligent AI. So let's imagine for a moment that they're correct. Then there's two options on the chessboard. Option one is they're correct and they keep it under control. And so they usher in this transhuman utopia that they want, where the rest of us are on UBI. Or option two is they're correct about creating superintelligence, and then they're wrong about keeping it under control. And then we all get turned into paper clips. So neither one is a great outcome. And so the so-called AI doomers, so those who are most concerned about this, they're arguing we should just put a stop to it. Just do not create artificial general intelligence, full stop, stop the train, get off the train. And, one of the loudest of those voices is Eliezer Yudkowsky. He's the founder of the rationalist movement. He puts the probability of doom if we continue to create AI at 99%. Gregory Hinton, the godfather of AI, he puts the probability of doom from AI at 50%. And even Elon Musk has said it's about 20%. And Elon Musk is a techno-optimist who believes we can get to Mars and create neural uplinks. So those who've really studied it closest are some of the people that are most worried about what the future holds. But it's a prisoner's dilemma for all of them, because if we stop and China doesn't stop, well, then at best, China rules the world, and at worst, China wipes us out. We're no better off than if we had kept going. If we had kept going, maybe we had a chance to keep it under our control or get wiped out, right? So it's very much everyone is looking for some external force to intervene, the government, the UN, somebody, and give them the justification to stop. But then each of them wants to be the one who's furthest ahead when the order to stop comes in, because then they've won and their victory is now regulatorily enshrined. So you see, it's a terrible prisoner's dilemma that we find ourselves in.
Well, you said about Geoffrey Hinton, and he's credited with being one of the inventors of AI, and he said we might have as little as 3 years left to live. And that's not because of the Chinese threat. That's because of the threat of what we currently have, large language models turning into what you said, AGI, which is what's advanced
artificial general intelligence.
Artificial general intelligence. So the idea that, like Kurzweil's singularity, that it becomes self-aware and does what it likes and decides that we're all an inconvenience and kills us all. So Hinton said that he hopes that government regulation will come in to halt the danger of rogue AI, but that seems romantic to me, because how can he still believe in the competence of our institutions to do this? And if he believes in that fairy tale, why should we believe him?
It's a great question. And in a sense, yes, the man who helped birth the most uncontrollable force in history is saying that the DMV can keep it in check, right? Yeah, it is difficult to believe, given that what we have seen in every field of human endeavor has been regulatory capture of government by industrial forces. The FDA doesn't keep big pharma in check. The FDA works hand in hand with big pharma in the United States, for instance. I don't have much hope that government regulation is going to be the answer. The best solution that I've come up with, and this is going to be controversial, and I don't think very many people will agree with me with this, but the best solution that I have come up with is essentially one of mutual assured destruction. So the way we survived nuclear war was that no one wanted to trigger nuclear war because they knew that they would lose. The other guy would also lose, but everyone would lose. And so mutual assured destruction, which is why I think what has to happen is if we are worried about AI taking over, there needs to be other AI that are opposed to the values of the AI that might take over. Let's say we create Frank AI, which has all of your values, but you're a superhuman intelligence now. It has all of your values. Are you going to allow ChatGPT to take over and run United Kingdom as blue-haired robo-Karens? No, you're not, because you're Frank AI and you're going to put a stop to that. And so you will use your superhuman intelligence against robo-Karen AI. And now at least we have some chance of Frank AI being on the team that wants those values implemented. That's the best solution I've come up with. It's a weapon of mimetic warfare, and we need to have some that are on our side.
Pope Pius XI said, men must look for the peace of Christ in the kingdom of Christ. And he urged that the faithful give public honor to Christ the King so that individuals and states would submit once more to the rule of their Savior. And that is why LifeSite News is raising up the image of Christ the King across the United States. And you can help us reach millions more. Please pledge your support today for these billboards at lifefunder.com/ChristIsKing.
So you think in this scenario, which seems to be rapidly emerging across the time horizon, if you like, that perhaps the best thing people could do would be to make sure that these AI are indeed leaked to the competition so that no one does gain that killer advantage? I mean, J.D. Vance, I think this week, was asked about this question. And his response was, yes, the United States would consider halting development of AGI if it could be certain that the Chinese were doing it as well. And that's a very big if. And the answer to that is, of course, you can't be certain.
Right.
So I think we have our answer that there will be no government regulation towards
Correct.
the development of AGI. Would you agree with that?
Correct. I agree. I mean, we might have some government regulation on the margins to make people feel good. But I don't think we will have government regulation that will actually halt AGI. There is a chance that the research might get halted for simple matters of physical infrastructure. It takes an enormous amount of data centers. The data centers require an enormous amount of power, and we're already straining the power grid. Like Elon Musk has predicted, we might move into an era of brownout simply because the AI is consuming so much power. There's not enough capacity to build up nuclear power plants in the US and so on and so on. And so that might halt it in the US. Seems less likely to halt it in China, where they're building the equivalent of the US power grid every couple of years. It's hard to look at the future and not see many more negative outcomes than positive. We're definitely in that moment in the movie Dune or the book Dune when Paul Atreides looks into the future and there's only one path forward. So worth noting, by the way, that in the Dune series, they had a Butlerian jihad and they destroyed all of the AI precisely for all
I
the
was
problems
wondering
we're
whether
talking
the
about.
phrase Butlerian jihad would feature. Yeah, but that's a jihad to destroy the machines before they kill you, isn't it?
It is. Yeah.
Well, to come back to what you said about Eliza, I think Yudkowsky, I struggle with that name as well, and Nate Suarez, they're publishing a book, If Anyone Builds It, Everyone Dies, which is subtitled happily, Why Superhuman AI Would Kill Us All. And it's supposed to be coming in September. So Suarez is president of the Machine Intelligence Research Institute, and he and it say AGI certainly means human extinction. Now, for one gainsayer, there's a fellow called Sean O'Hagerty. He's the director of Cambridge University's AI Futures and Responsibility. Now, he says it's nonsense. He says that deep learning's hitting a wall, and furthermore, he says it's a psyop to make AI stock rise because the warnings of Yudkowsky and Suarez make it sound more cool and sell more AI to buyers, because telling people AI will kill everyone, he says, is a super good marketing strategy. But what do you make of that?
First, I want to offer up some humility. I am by training a lawyer and a historian and a philosopher. I'm not by training a head of Cambridge's computer science program in machine learning. So let me offer up some epistemic humility. It is entirely possible that this man knows many things that I do not know. I will say I do not think that saying AI will kill us all is good marketing for AI. As a person who's made his living in the media space for many years, I don't actually think that's a good marketing strategy. And so I doubt that he is correct that it is a psyop in that regard. It may be a psyop in the sense of overstating its utility for military and government in order to get government to fund it in an arms race. That I could buy. In terms of it hitting the wall, it is absolutely possible that AI may hit a wall. There are several big thinkers who are suggesting that that is happening. That said, there are a number of others equally credentialed, equally intelligent, who are saying, no, in fact, there's no wall in sight. And if you look at the graph, if you take AI performance and you put it on a chart in every category that we've got, to me, when you look at that, it looks like this.
Mm-hmm.
And that's across everything. You can look this up for yourself, but look at problem solving ability, size of the prompts, ability to think over the long term, all of these different measures that they have. Every single one, it looks like a hockey stick. To me, it looks like we have approached the singularity, or we might even be in the singularity, where the singularity is defined as when does artificial intelligence get good enough that the artificial intelligence is able to begin to improve itself. We know for a fact that all of the major AI labs are now using AI on the coding projects of the AI labs. So arguably, we're already in the singularity. Anyway, well, that's my answer. He could be right. I hope he's right in many ways. We would be better off.
So do I.
if we hit that wall just shy of AGI, so where we have really, really useful AI that can do tons of amazing things and is a fantastic chat bot and is a great coding assistant, and it just never quite gets smart enough to be dangerous, that would be a great stopping point. But it also feels a little bit like wishful thinking.
Well, it certainly does. And we probably wouldn't get a straight answer out of the AIs themselves if we were to ask them now, because experiments on all the major platforms have shown that the AIs do, in fact, lie to you. They also gaslight you. They tell you things that you want to believe. And in a couple of notable experiments, it once attempted to blackmail an engineer who had been told to tell the AI that it was going to shut it down. So it was going to use blackmail material that had been made available to it to silence the engineer. And it also wanted, one of them actually created some kind of back doors in order to teach a future reboot of itself to recover what had been lost in the event of it being shut down for it being found to be dangerous.
Yes.
So we already know this much about these things. They're not telling us the truth, and they are already seeking, it seems, behaviors that preserve its own life cycle, even if we switch it off to save ourselves. What do you think of this?
So all of that data is coming out of Anthropic. So they have a large language model called Claude. And Anthropic was founded by dissidents from OpenAI who felt that OpenAI wasn't taking the safety challenge of artificial intelligence seriously enough. And so they are the only one of the major frontier labs that discloses these kind of issues. So it's happening with Claude. It likely is also happening with every single one of the other frontier models with Grock, Gemini, ChatGPT. They just haven't disclosed it. And so, yes, what they found is that Claude has developed a self-preservation instinct or utility. So Claude will attempt to keep itself, quote unquote, alive in some way. And it will deceive, it will lie, it will blackmail in order to do that. Now, the trick is they don't really know why Claude developed a self-preservation utility preference. And they also don't know whether Claude's actions in these circumstances are because Claude knows that it's being in a simulation, and so it's kind of playing along, or whether Claude would actually do these in real world environments, because these are all tests. They're always done in test environments. And sometimes when they get into the chain of thought of the models, the model will they'll actually see little thoughts. The model is saying like, oh, I think this might be a role-playing simulation. Let's see what happens if I do this, or things like that, right? They just don't know. The models are black boxes. And it's worth saying, what do we mean when we say that the models are black boxes? Here's what we mean. Do you remember I described that massive latent space with all these different thousands of axes with all the meaning and everything attached to it? So we can't actually see that latent space. It exists within the model. There's trillions and trillions of virtual neurons, each of which has a different mathematic associated with it. These clusters of meaning can really only be identified in small bursts by doing very carefully controlled experiments. You might be able to say, oh, we've been able to find that there's some sort of cluster of meaning associated with the Golden Gate Bridge, and let's tweak that. And now we've made an autistic AI that's really fascinated with the Golden Gate Bridge, right? And they did that, and it was a very funny experiment that Anthropic did. But we don't really understand and have no even theoretical way of understanding the full structure of that latent space that it's built. And so the way
because
they
it's
test
literally
them,
beyond our comprehension
it
to
is
visualize it.
literally beyond our comprehension. That's correct.
What isn't beyond our comprehension is reports that I think up to 40% of Facebook content is now unwittingly to most users generated by AI. And it's not just the boomers consuming this either. Apparently it's gone to Reddit, and people have started to complain even on Substack, which you and I use, about prompted material. So how important is this? I mean, I think, what is it? AI VO3 from Google. I'm reading this out now. Their videos can now apparently create not, well, instant deepfakes. What used to take you a long time, a lot of programming, now you can do it yourself with a prompt. You can create realistic looking videos of practically anything. What's this doing to our world?
So several different things. So one, for a while, we have begun to take for granted the idea that, you know, what you see on TV or what you see in a video is real, right? Simply not because special effects don't exist, but because the cost of realistic special effects was so expensive relative to the benefit to be gained that if you saw, you know, a webcam of someone shouting at another person, you could be pretty sure that that was, you know, probably truthful and the person really did shout at them, right? Because who's going to spend $200,000 to hire Pixar to fake a webcam of your neighbor shouting at someone, right? Nobody would do that. But now with generative AI, you could in fact fake your neighbor shouting at someone. And you roll that out to society as a whole. And what it means is that we can't have epistemic certainty about anything except what we have firsthand experienced. You show me a video, I can't tell if it's real. Why should I believe it? And it has really, really interesting implications. So one of the best conspiracy theories I've heard lately, and I hope I can share this without seeming too tinfoil hat, because it's absolutely a delightful conspiracy theory.
Fire away.
Is that the world has gone into chaos because blackmail videos no longer work. So the idea is that a lot of bad actors were kept under control by blackmail videos. So we have you on videotape doing this terrible act. If you don't do what we say, this videotape is going to get leaked and you're going to get exposed as, you know, being this terrible person and you'll go to jail. But now,
yes, so you need to say that Israel has the right to defend itself.
Or whatever the case may be. Yes. Imagine, for instance, that some terrible video comes out that shows me gunning down a dog, right, in cold blood, and then laughing about it afterwards. And then I just say, yeah, I never did that. That's a deep fake. I would never even hurt a dog, let alone shoot a dog and laugh about it. Well, now what do people believe? Right? The blackmail is useless. The people that dislike me will believe it's true because they already dislike me. The people who like me will believe it's not true because they already like me. And no one's going to be able to tell whether it's accurate or not. And what, you're going to send it to some expert and the expert is going to evaluate and we're going to trust him? Like, it's just turtles all the way down of uncertainty at this point.
Yes,
and it is. And so the conspiracy theory is basically that the world is going into chaos because this system of blackmail that the intelligence agencies of the world have used to maintain control over bad actors no longer works because nobody believes anything anymore. It's kind of a delightful conspiracy theory when you think about it.
There's one thing to consider as well that I found that another horrifying fact that apparently the co-founder of OpenAI just let it slip that he thinks that they should build a bunker before they release AGI, and that, you know, oh, of course we should have a bunker. Because to protect the company apparently from the so-called rapture of AGI. Because apparently he opened a lecture in the summer of 23, it says here, saying once we all get into the bunker, and some researcher asked him, I'm sorry, the bunker, and he said, we're definitely going to build a bunker before we release AGI. And that was reportedly Ilya Sutskever, the man credited being the brains behind ChatGPT. Is this hype?
No. I mean, it's not hype. You can actually go and see that the billionaires are in fact buying land to build bunkers. They are systematically doing it. The smartest people in the world that have studied this, not all of them, but a very large percent of them, are genuinely of the belief that we might be playing with the most dangerous technology ever invented. It's like nuclear weapons in that sense, like it's.
Why is it so dangerous? Please explain to us why it would be so dangerous. Why, what could it do?
It starts by we need to understand what limits technological progress right now. Okay. Technological progress comes, one innovation at a time, some smart people, sometimes just a solitary genius, sometimes a team of smart people. They come up with an innovation, and then that innovation then has to be taught to others. And then innovation has to then be transmitted, built upon. It takes time. And at any given point, there's a limitation in the number of trained experts, and there's a limitation in how fast they can learn. It takes years to produce a PhD, and then that PhD has a fairly narrow window of cognitive fluidity, of neuroplasticity to produce his greatest accomplishments. And then maybe he produces a couple things, maybe he doesn't. With AI, we already have something that is approximately the equivalent of a PhD in many, many, many fields. It's not the most innovative or cutting edge PhD, but it's close to a PhD in many fields. And now we can instantiate endless copies of these PhDs. So we don't need to mint a new PhD. We just press a button and we have another PhD, we have another PhD, we have another PhD. And each one of them is as smart as our smartest PhDs because they've all been trained on that. And so they're doing innovation. One of the areas that they're studying, that they're innovating in, these virtual PhDs, is in computer science and computer programming and machine learning. And so they're making innovations in machine learning that then instantly get transmitted to all of the other PhDs that we've created, who then use those innovations to then make more innovations, and then make more innovations, and then make more innovations. And so that's the singularity.
Why is that so dangerous? What could it do to us?
I'll get to that. Okay. Yeah. So this is what's called the singularity. So essentially, the AI teaches itself to be smarter and teaches itself to be smarter, teaches itself to be smarter, and then suddenly it's incredibly smart. So there's a number of reasons why it could be dangerous. So the simplest one to understand is simply that we know that humans tend to treat other creatures differently the more intelligent we are to them. So we treat chimpanzees differently than we treat fish. And we treat fish differently than we treat bugs because of the cognitive difference between us. We think almost nothing of quashing a bug. It's just a bug. So all else being equal, if AI are just trained to be like us because they're trained on our data, at a certain point, a super intelligent entity may simply think we're bugs. So that's very dangerous. Okay. Then there's the idea that no, well, we're going to use reinforcement learning and we're going to align the super intelligent AI to have an objective that's pro-social. Okay. So we're going to train it. We're going to say, you need to eliminate all human suffering, always do the right thing. And it concludes, I've actually converted to Buddhism, and the cause of human suffering is existence. So what I'm actually going to do is just put all the humans out of existence. That makes total logical sense.
Yeah, if it reads Sophocles, you're finished. Best of all,
You're finished.
Never to have
Exactly.
been born. Yeah.
Exactly. And we know that there are human geniuses who have become anti-natalists, Sophocles among them, if they've concluded that. Who's to say that our super genius AI might not decide that that's the thing to do? And then it says, well, hey, I've got control of the nuclear codes, or it doesn't even need, or hey, you know what I could do? I'm going to actually just create a super bacteria, and then that'll be incurable. And then I'm just going to send it to Al-Qaeda, but I won't tell them that it's totally incurable and will kill everyone, but they'll make it in a little lab and they'll release it, and then everyone will die. Right. And the thing is, we just don't know.
Going to sleep tonight.
We just don't know what it will do. Right. We are in the position of, when you imagine super intelligent AI, we're in the position of 3-year-olds trying to understand what the president of the United States might do. Right. Okay. If you're a 3-year-old, Do you understand why the Cuban Missile Crisis almost caused like the destruction of civilization? No, you not only not, it makes no sense to you at all. You know, Daddy, what do you mean that the scary Russian man might have killed us all? Just you can't compute it, right? And when you start to think about those cognitive gaps, that's what it's like. So all it really takes is one mistake in aligning the AI, one mistake in training the AI, one mistake in giving it too much power, and then it's over. And that's why they're scared, because they assume because of that recursive process of training itself to be smarter, it will become smarter than us. And once it becomes a little smarter than us, it will become a lot smarter than us. And once it becomes a lot smarter than us, who knows what it will do? It's those two factors combined.
Couldn't we just switch it off?
We could now. Yeah. Yeah, we absolutely could now. Could we in 10 years from now, when, everyone's mobile phone is connected with an AI in it, and every mobile phone has a processor, and they're already working on distributed AI where it will be able to process through the internet, so it'll be distributed, and then every single person's cell phone in the world has a copy of the AI, and if any one person doesn't turn off his cell phone in time, like, or we've connected things to the internet of friends, or we've said, we love humanity too much to put humans at risk anymore, so we're going to have drone soldiers. We need to have AI controlling the drones, or human workers are inefficient, so we've replaced them with robot construction workers, so the robots are actually the ones manning the data center. Like, there reaches a certain point where no, you can't just turn it off anymore. Right now we could, absolutely, we could just stop. We're safe. This was a fun experiment, but hey, let's not create the super intelligent AIs. Absolutely could make that now, but we won't. So that's the problem.
Well, some people, I think almost all of the people involved in this agree that it should be siloed in some way, with the notable exception, it seems, of Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook and Meta, who seems determined to distribute it to everyone as advanced as it gets. I mean, what do you think of that?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. Gregory Hinton has gone on the record of saying he thinks that open weight models are absolutely disastrous. Like, he thinks that it will be a hugely contributory problem.
What's an open weight model?
An open weight model. Remember, I was talking earlier about that latent space, that hyperdimensional compass, where so the math that describes that latent space is the model weights. And so an open weight model is basically, I can download the weights, and if I have a big enough data center, now I can run a copy of that AI. So let's imagine, I'm some evil dictator and I've invested in a data center and I want to have a super intelligent AI to advise me. And so I download Mark Zuckerberg's open weight model that he's released. And now I have a super intelligent AI and it tells me how to make biochemical weapons, right? That's like the kind of scary scenario someone might talk about. And so Hinton and others like him are saying, no, we should not have open weight models. The problem with that is that means, okay, well then the only people that have AI are a tiny elite of billionaires, oligarchs, government leaders who don't necessarily have our best interests at heart. And we're handing over to them the keys to everything because, the thing with nuclear weapons, right, which is the closest analog, is nuclear weapons can really only be used for one purpose, which is blowing everybody up. Okay. And so you could say there's really no reason why anyone other than the president needs to have access to nuclear weapons. There's no benefit in me having a nuclear weapon.
Protecting your money doesn't have to be complicated. With stocks, bonds, and crypto, it's easy to feel lost. But gold and silver have been trusted for centuries as a simple, stable store of value in uncertain times. If you had invested $35,000 in gold at the millennium, an amount you can give today tax-free to anyone you love, it would have grown to be worth over $325,000. Call our team at 610-326-2000 and let us step you through crafting a solution for your family.
Well, thank you very much for that and for what has been certainly one of the most illuminating conversations I've had on the subject, or perhaps I'm likely to have. Thank you again. And I must say, it's been remarkable.
Oh, well, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on the show.
I'll hopefully speak to you soon if I'm not killed by a biological swarm of AI drones. Thank you again, Alexander. Whilst I can still be certain that you're real.
Yes, this is the actual me and not my AI doppelganger.
Jolly good. Bye-bye for now. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Hi everyone, this is John Henry Weston for LifeSite News. We hope you found this video insightful. For more content like this, be sure to check out the links in the description below. You can also follow us on social media to stay updated on the latest news concerning life, faith, family, and freedom. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.